I'm William Anderegg. I'm an associate professor in the School of Biological Sciences here at the U and the director of the Wilkes Center for Climate Science and Policy. I want to share some thoughts about potential solutions and priorities to consider in the prediction and forecasting area in this wildfire challenge. First, I think there's a huge amount of potential for seasonal forecasts of fire risks, things that combine fuels data, climate data, and weather and climate models, potentially with some new advanced machine learning and AI techniques. Second, a pretty promising idea is thinking about more multi-year forecasting and long-term risks that communities are likely to face, particularly those that include climate change and how climate change is going to really supercharge wildfire behavior and fire weather in many areas. And third, I think there's a huge amount of potential for smoke forecasts and how the impacts of fire affect health, and we can start to project those going forward into the future in a changing climate. Finally, one kind of underlying piece that you might think about is I think there's a huge amount of scope for combining a whole bunch of different data sets that are not typically combined together. These include things like satellite data, data from weather models, and a bunch of community and demography types of data to see where folks are and how many people might be in harm's way as wildfires change in coming years. I see some really exciting opportunities for innovation here in really pulling in the best available science about future climate projections and how those are likely to change wildfire behavior, frequency, and different fire characteristics. A lot of our tools are based on the past and how fires have behaved in the past 30, 40 years. And that's changing rapidly with drier conditions here in the West, hotter temperatures, and more extreme fire weather. And so we really need our tools to pull in these best projections of future climate change to have better forecasts in coming years. On this critical aspect of how can we mitigate risk from wildfires, I think there are a number of possible intervention points that you might want to think about. Just to name a couple of the commonly considered ones. First is the broad scale way we manage forests and how we can manage forests to try to reduce the likelihood and severity of fires that get started. So these are often ways to reduce the fuels found in forests through things like selective timber harvest or prescribed fires. That's kind of the landscape regional set of strategies we might think about. Zooming in a little bit more, there's a huge number of strategies around community planning and how do we set up our communities to try to minimize the people in harm's way and minimize the amount of structures and infrastructure that's at risk. There's also thinking about fire hardening and defensive spaces and fuel breaks, and when individuals' fires start, try to reduce the risk to certain areas in our communities. And then zooming in a bit more, there's a whole set of strategies around fire hardening of structures, potentially new innovations in building materials, and how we can try to make sure that when fires get close, maybe they're not as damaging to structures as they could be. A couple of key questions to grapple with in this risk mitigation space. First, what's the evidence out there about how effective are different interventions into reducing fire risk? Second, what are the costs, some of the barriers, some of the trade-offs, and potentially some of the co-benefits of these different interventions that we discussed? How can we help ensure that many vulnerable and marginalized communities also have access and can deploy some of these interventions? Finally, we really want to think about how can policies help drive or incentivize these various interventions, and this could be at local, state, and national levels. Here, I think there's some exciting potential in innovations that pull in our extensive satellite record of how fires have behaved in the past, pull in some of these climate model projections, and leverage some of our cutting-edge machine learning and AI techniques to actually build models of where fire risks are and how different interventions can reduce those fire risks, how we can deploy those, and really how we can do our best to reduce risks to people and to ecosystems around the US. Good luck in this hackathon. It's an exciting area, and we can't wait to see the solutions that you all come up with.